the Republicans were on attack. So now they're continuing their chaotic, and I would call their broken promises, which are exactly opposite of the American ethic. And the American ethic is one of earned benefits through whether it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, et cetera, earned benefits by people who have spent their working lives contributing. And when it's time for their pensions under Social Security, et cetera, those earned benefits then are available. So those are under threat, dramatic threat, by this Congress, by the Senate majority, which is very slim, and also by the president himself, because he lied. He said he wasn't going to hurt these programs, and he's working to the extent to which he has a day's work. He's working hard. Well, he vacations a lot in Florida, but he's working hard to decimate these programs. And so the answer to that is organized democracy. The answer to that is the answer we're seeing in these elections. And so that very much gives me hope.
Well, so you mentioned that you work with the group Social Security Works. Could you tell people about that?
Social Security Works was founded in the early 1980s. There was a commission that was organized, actually during the Reagan administration, to make some changes to Social Security, because there was an anticipated shortfall that would have harmed the solvency of Social Security. The two people that staffed it are the people that created Social Security Works, Nancy Altman and Eric Kingston. Later on, they created the organization that I now consult with. I'm their California person. And Social Security Works is an organization that that fights for the protection and expansion of these programs. And I mean the social insurance programs. And so I met Alex Lawson, who's the executive director and one of the best organizers I've ever known, and and very much a visionary. And I also met Nancy and Eric and other people with Social Security Works when I decided to come back to California in 2013 after being in D.C. for a couple of years. Alex and I kept our friendship going, and we talked. And he knew that he wisely believed that it would be good to have me on board in California, and I've enjoyed the last couple of years as a consultant with them. I speak for them. I speak on their issues. This radio show will have a lot to do with engaging Alex and folks from Social Security Works to give us updates from D.C. I had a radio show on We Act Radio, which Alex Lawson co-founded in Washington, D.C. That was the first time I actually had a radio show. So my point is that Social Security Works is one of the most progressive and hardworking protectors of our retirement security program, and they're also very much fighting for expansion of those programs.
Okay, so then over the years you've modeled your work after quite a few people, the iconic figures that I'd like to share with the listeners, who are your mentors and why, and what do you feel that they gave you, and why you based what you do after them?
Well, I started in the very early years of the farm worker movement. I started worked on the grape boycott in the late 60s. And in those days, I never went to theological school, but somehow I hooked up with the California Migrant Ministry, which later became the National Farm Worker Ministry. And I had the great pleasure and honor of working directly for Chris Hartmeyer, who was the director of that organization. He taught me a lot. He taught me how organizing is a counterweight to corporate power. In this case, it was the organizing of farm workers was a counterweight to the power of the growers who were trying to kill the union and stop organizing. So one very important mentor to me was Chris Hartmeyer, who was the head of the California Migrant Ministry. I would also say that many people I've worked in Washington with, all the way from Alex Lawson from Social Security Works to Heather Booth, who is with the Midwest Academy. I spent when I was working in D.C. for the National Committee. Heather was there. We talked daily, and she coached me a lot on everything from management to strategy. And, of course, the Midwest Academy has been in the forefront of training organizers throughout the country. Another mentor of mine was Margot Cowan, who was the woman who was directly involved in what was called the Edgar Guillo strike in San Diego, which was a group of workers who went on strike against they were tomato pickers in South San Diego, San Isidro specifically. I've had the ability to work with Arturo Rodriguez from the Farm Workers Movement. So I've had I've been lucky in that regard. I've had a lot of people that have taught me, that have spent time with me, have put up with my questions, and have taught me that time is an important commodity for organizing, and organizing can be a counterweight to corporate interests, whether it's the agricultural industry or the banking industry or the Republicans who are out to gut Medicare and Social Security. I mean, I had not a lot of time with Cesar Chavez. One of the pieces that I wrote for Zocalo was called Driving Cesar Chavez. And so, but when I saw him, when I was with him, I learned, I tried to learn as much as I could, and it was quite an exciting moment for me.
That's great. So, well, one thing that I'd like to see answered, and I think it would be great if we were able to reach out to younger generations. So let's say you're 19 years old. You know you want to do more in life than just make money. You want to contribute your time, your heart, your soul, your life to social change. So what do you do? What do you suggest?
You find a campaign and you volunteer. I mean, it's basically, I mean, you can Google everything you want to Google and look for jobs that are posted. But what I have found is that those that are successful, and let me define what I mean by successful. Those who get engaged in political and social change movements are people that put their heart and their soul and their body into it. So sure, if you see a job posted, apply for it. Whether it's with, there's for example a young group that works on retirement security issues called Young Invincibles, who we've had before on the radio show, and that's a group of young people that care deeply about these issues. There's a new group in Los Angeles that is working, literally college-age students working on the Alzheimer's issue. But my point is that is you got to put your heart and yourself into campaigns, and that means learn it as you go and do it as you go. So I would say that anybody that wants to be involved in public policy is to find a campaign you believe in and volunteer and learn the ropes and watch the tactics roll out and watch the strategies develop, sometimes on a daily basis. The best way to do it is to do it.
Gotcha. So would you say that one issue that I think it feeds a lot of economic issues, but doesn't specifically seem to tie in with Social Security and whatnot, but you're very concerned with how racism is standing in the country right now. Do you feel that it's more pervasive than in other periods in the past, or have we progressed?
I think that we're in a tipping point. All of the Trump plans, I mean, whether or not it's to break his promises that, coming out of the terrible killings in Florida, break his promises to those young students when he met with them in the White House around issues of gun control and gun safety. The victims are in low-income communities still, but now it's in middle-class communities as well. So where is racism right now? The more that we lose on the safety net, the more that it allows racist tendencies and racist forces to continue with the oppressive tactics that they've used. So my point is that as we see tax cuts, I mean, we haven't talked about the terrible tax cuts in the Trump tax scam that just passed in December. Those will hurt African American and Latino communities. just like they'll hurt other communities. In fact, even perhaps more. And so vigilance is called for in those communities as well, to keep their elected officials accountable and to offer, the civil rights movement is very much a model. It was a grassroots movement, and we need to look at that model and emulate it now, because a lot of these freedoms that were won in the past are very much in jeopardy in the present situation.
Well, so as an organizer, how do you suggest that we get our country back?
By using the democratic institutions that we have, whether it's voter turnout, whether it's the First Amendment, by a proper interpretation of the Second Amendment, in which assault machine guns should not be in the hands of people, should not be publicly available, by using the very foundation of our government and our freedoms, and seeing that as fuel to build democratic participation.
Gotcha. So, would you say that you're tired? I mean, I don't mean literally this second, but like having to deal with it. Like, you've been at this 50 years and seeing the things always cycle around, and here we are in a dark era that, as you noted, is almost even worse than, or is even worse than Nixon. Say, so are you tired, or are you inspired?
I find purpose in what I do.
Yeah,
I find sustenance, emotional and spiritual sustenance in what I do. I've seen social change close up. I've seen victories close up. When I got to Ocean Park in 1973, that's a little part of Santa Monica, the southern part of Santa Monica, the city redevelopment agency had just devastated an entire community. And what I mean by that, there was about a 24-acre location in southern Santa Monica, literally across the street from the beach, where they had evicted thousands of residents who were poor, who many times were East European residents who had come to Santa Monica after World War II, and I saw the ravages of poor people through redevelopment. I then was hired by a church that had a lot of vision. There's a church in Ocean Park. The minister was a friend who in those days that I'd known from earlier days, and I still see him. His name was Reverend Jim Kahn, and I saw us change the trends in Santa Monica such to where affordable housing is part of every project that is built. They were going to build two nasty high-income towers, adding about 1,800 residents. No replacement to the people that have been kicked out. We changed that through the California Coastal Act to where the density was cut to 400, and we got 180 affordable units and a public park in that project. My point being was that I've seen that citizen participation can change. I'm watching the citizen participation in protecting Social Security and Medicare. They tried to kill the ACA, and there were hundreds of demonstrations around the country. There was enormous heat put on the Republican Party, and so the ACA survived that, and it's only because of the citizen power that was implemented. Much of it spontaneous by a number of organizations, including the one that I work with, Social Security Works, and others around the country and up and down California. So yeah, am I tired? I ain't got time to be tired. There's too much to do,
yeah.
And there's too much. And this stuff, it sustains me, and I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunities that I've had with these great organizations and great people that I know and have worked with.
And I guess we'll just put you on going out on a happier note. Not that that's not happy about part of it, but World Series 2018, Dodgers versus Yankees, or what do you think? And besides that, why is baseball? You're a passionate baseball fan. Why is that so important to you when you're known as a political freak here?
Well, I couldn't dunk in high school because I was never tall enough. I was afraid of football because of injury. but then I became a baseball catcher, which is where there's a lot of injuries. I don't know. I just fell in love with baseball at about